Welcome to Random Movie Reviews. I'm Nathan, and today I'll be talking about Thanksgiving. So I just got done watching this movie literally maybe 15 minutes ago, and boy, did I have a lot of fun. When it comes to Eli Roth, I'm really not that familiar with any of his works because this is the first Eli Roth movie that I've seen. And there's a reason behind that. The reason behind that is because it is the only Eli Roth movie that I've been interested in watching. All of his other past horror movies, his most famous ones or infamous ones, films like Hostel or Green Inferno and all those movies, I'm just not interested in that kind of area of horror where it's just kind of shock value for the sake of shock value. I especially detest the whole torture porn subgenre, so I have no interest in Hostel or any of the Saw movies. I think they're all garbage, but that's just me. When it comes to horror specifically, there are two sides of horror that is for me. There's the slow, creepy, genuinely atmospheric horror movies, films like The Shining, Alien, the original Halloween. And then on the other side, there's the really fun, outlandish, campy, absurd horror movies. Movies like Evil Dead 2, Peter Jackson's Dead Alive, aka Brain Dead, Reanimator. Those are the two sides of horror that I am the biggest fan of. And this film in particular definitely falls into the tongue-in-cheek, kind of campy, but also a wonderful homage to the slasher genre as a whole. If there's one issue I have with the majority of newer horror movies that have been coming out for the past several years, is that it feels like the vast majority of them are super serious and like more depressing than they are scary. And it's not that I don't like any of the newer horror movies that have come out for the past several years. There's been several that I've enjoyed. I just wish that there was more variety in modern horror. For example, 70s and 80s in particular are my two favorite decades for horror because there was a good balance of both. You had your hyper serious horror movies, and then you have your fun, entertaining, schlocky horror movies. And when I say there aren't any new, fun, campy horror movies today, I'm not talking about like those stupid, like Winnie the Pooh, bottom of the barrel trash movies. I'm talking about campy horror movies that are actually well made. Evil Dead 2 is probably the best example, where that movie is absurd and it's not really meant to be scary. It's more meant to just be entertained by, but there is an artistry behind that. There is amazing direction by Sam Raimi. And that's the kind of fun campy that I'm talking about. Campy that is actually well executed. And Thanksgiving is definitely filling that void. There isn't that many horror movies out nowadays that have this type of tone where it's clearly winking at the audience. And it was just a lot of fun watching the movie. This is going to be a spoiler-free review, by the way. So Thanksgiving takes place a year after the Black Friday massacre took place in a small town in Massachusetts, really affected the community, and now there are a string of killings that are directly related to that Black Friday massacre in what appears to be a revenge scheme because of the innocent people that lost their lives there. So right off the bat, from that scene moving forward, I could tell that Thanksgiving was having a bit of a satirical feel in terms of commenting on the shameless consumerism around the holiday season. And as somebody who used to work mall security, that's right, I used to work at a mall. I have seen 2 Black Fridays there at my time. And yeah, it is a site that really tests your faith in humanity, how people behave towards one another. And so one of the joys of watching Thanksgiving is that pretty much all of the characters that get massacred in this movie are terrible asshole characters, and it just that adds to the enjoyment of watching the film. And tonally, I'm really impressed with how Eli Roth was able to have that satirical element that is kind of felt throughout the movie about the shameless consumerism around the holiday season. How the movie is very campy and very absurd, but also there is a sincerity too. Like, the characters are actually wanting to solve this mystery. They want to know who's behind the killings. They want to know what their motivation is and how that is connected to the Black Friday massacre that happened in their town. And so that the film walks a very fine line between sincerity and just insane campiness. And clearly the movie's not really meant to like scare you. Like, if you're a veteran horror fan, you're not going to watch this movie to be genuinely scared. You're going to watch this movie to be thoroughly entertained. And as someone who loves a well-made slasher movie, this is definitely one of the best ones to come out in years. And this is coming from someone who enjoyed Scream 6. I liked Scream 6 quite a bit, actually, but I think Thanksgiving is better. For one, it's definitive Thanksgiving horror movie, which surprisingly enough, there really hasn't been. I'm not saying there's never been horror movies around Thanksgiving. I'm sure that there have, but there's never been like a definitive one that was like as well made and as absurd as this film is. And so that's nice. It gives you a reason to, hey, I might throw this on this upcoming Thanksgiving, and maybe, you know, annually. It's a fun movie. Why not? But I should warn people that, you know, if you're seeing this review and you're like, oh, I don't normally like horror movies, but this sounds kind of good. It is extremely gory, but it is cartoonishly gory. It's not like there's the realism in this movie in terms of violence is not very realistic at all. But that doesn't change the fact that when this movie decides to get gross, because this is Eli Roth after all, it gets pretty gross, but in a way that I think is fun, and I don't take it seriously, and that just kind of adds to the enjoyment. Eli Roth clearly has a love for the slasher genre. There's a lot of homages in this movie to past slasher films, and the film itself is very straightforward and cliched, but in a way that I think works because it's just so well executed by Roth. I think the biggest comparison that this film should be compared to is obviously Scream. It takes the same template as Scream, where it's surrounded by these teenagers. There is not really a meta quality to it like Scream has, but there's that satirical element about Thanksgiving. And it's essentially a whodunit, which a lot of the best slasher movies kind of revolve around. Who's this killer? What's their motivation? And there's always kind of that twist ending, which this movie has. And there's even like the final, without getting too much into spoilers, there's the final like false scare that was very reminiscent of like the Friday the 13th movies and stuff like that. And so if you're a fan of the slasher movie genre, I don't see how you could not have a good time with this. It has all the strengths of a slasher movie while pretty much ignoring all of the main weaknesses, which is that some of the more lower tier slasher movies, like you look at a film like The Prowler, where like the kills and the special effects in that movie are pretty incredible, done by the great Tom Savini, but the rest of the movie is just a boring slog to watch. I mean, that movie is so freaking dull. Thanksgiving moves from the second it starts, and all of the performances fit the tone of the movie perfectly. Like I said, they kind of ride the line between being overtly campy and also being sincere. And then there are certain characters that you like, that you want to root for, and then there are certain characters that you're annoyed by and you want to see them get slaughtered. And so this movie delivers that perfectly. It feels like a greatest hits of slasher movies, and it's just so well done. It's a lot of fun. The movie works when you watch it with your tongue firmly planted in your cheek. Not a lot of this is meant to be taken all that seriously. At least I didn't take it all that seriously, but that doesn't mean that I don't actually respect the direction. I think Eli Roth, based on this movie, which is the only movie I've seen of his, I think he's a good director, and he clearly understands the genre and he has a fondness of it. This movie does border on like outright horror comedy. I wouldn't say that it is. Like, it's mostly a slasher movie, but there is a lot of comedy in this movie, and the vast majority of it works really well. There were numerous laugh out loud moments for me while watching this movie. And overall, it just made me realize that there isn't that many really well done but fun, trashy horror movies anymore. Most horror movies that are very successful nowadays are super serious, and it's not like I don't want those movies to stop being made. I want the horror genre to thrive. I just miss the variety, and that's why my favorite horror movie of the 2020 so far is Malignant, which expect a review on that soon, because I have a lot to say about that movie. I think that movie is going to be a cult classic in the next couple of years. That film, as far as I'm concerned, is a camp nonsense horror movie masterpiece, and Thanksgiving is a close second. I love all sorts of horror movies, and I love how you can have different levels of horror in horror movies, but I just want fun horror movies to come back. I want to see horror movies that are more in the tone of like Evil Dead 2, Reanimator, Tremors, just movies that aren't horror movies that aren't afraid to have fun and not take themselves too seriously. And it was really refreshing watching Thanksgiving. So anyway, guys, that's my thoughts on Thanksgiving. Tell me what you think of this movie. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What are some of your favorite campy horror movies? And as always, thank you guys for watching.